She thought her life was perfect until the day a stranger arrived at her family's gate, wearing an identical emerald ring her father swore was one of a kind. Their faces were the same, their pasts completely different, and what they were about to uncover would shatter decades of lies and tear open secrets buried deep within the walls of the Montrose estate. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where you are watching from. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Now, let's jump into the story. The morning sun rolled gently over the coastline of Carmel, spilling gold over the wide glass windows of the Montrose estate. Clarissa Montrose stood in her walk-in closet, her fingers sliding absently over the soft folds of silk and cashmere. She had more clothes than she could ever wear, yet her mind was far from fashion. For weeks, she had been waking with a strange emptiness, a feeling that something in her life was missing. The estate was quiet that morning. Her father, David, was already at the office managing his shipping empire. Her mother, Marina, had gone into town for a charity meeting. Clarissa moved slowly, choosing a pale sweater and dark jeans, dressing with the effortless grace that had been drilled into her since childhood. As she fastened her watch, the emerald ring on her right hand caught the light. It was a striking piece, Colombian emerald set in white gold, carved in an intricate pattern she had never seen anywhere else. Her father had given it to her when she was a child, telling her it was made especially for her and could never be duplicated. He always smiled when he said it, but there was a shadow in his eyes she could never quite understand. She walked down the grand staircase, the marble cool under her feet, and made her way toward the breakfast table on the terrace. The smell of fresh coffee hung in the air. Just as she sat down, the sound of the front gate buzzer echoed through the hall. The housekeeper, Elena, was upstairs, so Clarissa rose to answer it herself. She stepped across the polished entryway and unlocked the heavy front door. Outside stood a delivery driver, holding a small envelope. The woman was dressed in worn jeans, a plain t-shirt, and work boots, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked like she had been on the road all morning. But Clarissa's breath caught in her throat. It was like looking into a mirror. The driver had the same height, the same build, the same deep brown eyes, even the same faint scar above her left eyebrow, the one Clarissa had gotten from falling off her bike when she was 6 years old. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled through the cypress trees lining the driveway. "Good morning," the woman finally said, her voice carrying a faint accent. "I have a delivery for Mr. Montrose. Urgent documents. I need his signature." Clarissa nodded slowly, still studying her face. "He's not here right now, but can I ask, do we know each other?" The driver's brow furrowed. "No, my name's Leah Sanders. I work for Coastal Express. But you look exactly like me." Clarissa took a half step forward, almost without thinking. "You noticed it too." "Hard not to," Leah said, her eyes scanning Clarissa's features. That was when Clarissa saw it, the glint of green on Leah's right hand. Her stomach tightened. It was the same emerald ring, identical in every detail, the color, the carving, the setting. An exact match for the one her father had sworn was one of a kind. "Your ring," Clarissa said quietly. Leah glanced down. "What about it?" "I have the same one." Clarissa lifted her hand, letting the morning light catch the gem. The two rings sparkled together, impossibly alike. Leah's voice dropped. "My father gave me this before he left. He said it was the only one like it in the world. That's what my father told me," Clarissa whispered. Silence settled between them again, heavier now, filled with questions neither could form. Leah shifted the envelope in her hands. "Look, I need to get back on my route. I've got 3 more stops before noon." "Wait," Clarissa said quickly. "This can't be a coincidence. We don't just look the same. We have the same ring. Please, come inside for a few minutes." Leah hesitated, glancing past Clarissa at the sweeping staircase, the crystal chandelier, the art lining the walls. "I don't belong in a place like this." Clarissa shook her head. "Belonging has nothing to do with it. There's a reason we're standing here, and I think we both deserve to find out what it is." Leah studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something in her mind. Then she gave a short nod. "All right, but just for a few minutes." Clarissa stepped aside to let her in. As Leah crossed the threshold, her eyes flicked upward, taking in the grandeur of the home. But Clarissa wasn't watching the house. She was watching Leah. There was something in the way she moved, a quiet strength, a calm self-possession that didn't belong to someone easily impressed by wealth. They walked together toward the living room, their matching rings catching the same shafts of sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Clarissa's heart was beating faster now. She didn't know what they would uncover, but she knew one thing with certainty. Her life had just changed, and the answer to the emptiness she had felt for so long might be standing right beside her. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked softly as Leah sat on the edge of the Montrose estate's velvet armchair. Clarissa had just poured her a cup of coffee, though neither of them had touched it. The silence between them was heavy, both aware that the rings on their fingers were more than a strange coincidence. Clarissa leaned forward. "Leah, do you know anything about your mother's past?" Leah looked down at her cup, her voice low. "My mom's name is Rose Sanders. She raised me on her own. She doesn't talk much about the time before I was born. Every time I ask about my father, she changes the subject." Clarissa hesitated, then spoke. "My father said my mother couldn't have children, so they adopted me. But they've never told me from where. I always thought it was from an agency overseas. Now, I'm not so sure." The air between them seemed to tighten, as if the truth was close but unwilling to show itself. 28 years earlier, the Montrose estate looked much the same as it did now. Tall white walls, wide green lawns, the ocean breeze curling through the open windows. Rose Sanders was young then, barely 20, working as a maid for the Montrose family. She had taken the job to support her aging parents, never imagining how deeply her life would become entangled with theirs. David Montrose was different from his wealthy friends. Where others were cold and commanding, David was kind, curious, and spoke to Rose as though her thoughts mattered. At first, their conversations were short, polite exchanges in the hallway, but over time, they grew longer. Marina Montrose, David's wife, traveled often for charity galas and business events. During one of her long absences, David and Rose's friendship slipped into something more. By the end of that summer, Rose knew she was pregnant. She had no plan, no idea how to tell David, and every reason to believe her job would be gone the moment Marina returned. But when she finally told him, David surprised her. He didn't turn away. He promised to take care of her and the baby. What neither of them expected was for Rose to give birth to twins. David was overjoyed. He held both girls in his arms, certain they would find a way to raise them together. But the moment Marina walked into that hospital room, everything changed. Marina's face was calm, almost too calm. She told Rose the situation was unacceptable and would be handled to avoid public scandal. Her plan was simple and cruel. One child would be taken in by the Montrose family and raised as their own. The other would be sent away with Rose, who would receive enough money to start over, under the condition she never spoke of what happened. Rose refused at first, but Marina's influence was strong. She had the power to ruin Rose's life, to take both babies away entirely. The threat was clear. Before leaving the hospital, Marina presented 2 identical emerald rings. She said each girl would have one, A silent connection neither would understand until fate intervened. Back in the present, Clarissa sat frozen as Leah finished telling her side. That's all my mom ever told me. She said my father died before I was born. She never mentioned his name. But I remember, when I was a kid, I found an old photograph. It was of her, standing in front of this very house. She made me promise never to tell anyone I'd seen it. Clarissa's thoughts swirled. The photograph, the matching rings, their faces. It was all too much to dismiss. Later that night, Clarissa decided to confront her mother. Marina was sitting in the study, reading through a stack of charity proposals. Mother, Clarissa began, how exactly did you and Dad adopt me? Marina looked up sharply, her expression unreadable. We've discussed this before. It was arranged privately. There's nothing more to say. Nothing more to say? Clarissa's voice trembled. Then why does a woman who looks exactly like me, wearing the same ring you told me was unique, remember her mother working here? Marina's eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. Be careful where your curiosity takes you, Clarissa, she said quietly, her tone more warning than comfort. Some truths are better left alone. Clarissa left the room with her pulse pounding. She couldn't let it go now. The next morning, she called a discreet investigator she knew through a friend. She didn't mention Leah's name, only asked for every record, every document, connected to. Across town, Leah stood outside her small apartment, watching the street. She had the uneasy feeling someone had been following her since she left the Montrose estate. Her mother had refused again to answer her questions. But now, there was a fear in Rose's eyes that Leah had never seen before. As the wind picked up and clouds gathered over Carmel, both women felt it. Something long buried was beginning to surface. And whatever it was, it would not stay hidden much longer. 2 days after their first meeting, Clarissa stood in her bedroom, staring at her phone. The investigator she had hired finally called. His voice was low, careful. Clarissa, I've reviewed hospital archives from the year you were born. The records were altered. There's a birth certificate for you under Marina and David Montrose's names. But the original file shows 2 infants born to a Rose Sanders on the same day at the same hospital. Clarissa's pulse raced. Twins, she whispered. Yes, the investigator confirmed. It looks like one child was listed as stillborn, but there's no record of burial. Instead, the infant's file disappears from public records entirely. Clarissa thanked him, though her voice shook. The truth was no longer hiding in shadows. It was coming into focus. That same afternoon, Leah was at the Coastal Express depot when her phone buzzed. Clarissa's message was short. We need to talk. Meet me at the Montrose estate at 7. When Leah arrived, the sun had already dipped low, painting the ocean in shades of copper. She stepped inside, her boots clicking against the marble floor. Clarissa was waiting in the living room, documents spread across the coffee table. I have proof, Clarissa said, without preamble. You're my sister. Leah stared at the papers. Birth records, altered hospital files, the investigator's notes. Her throat tightened. I knew something was wrong. My mom never wanted to talk about my father, but now I see why. She was protecting me. Clarissa nodded, and my mother was protecting herself. Marina wanted to control the story. She's been lying to both of us for nearly 3 decades. Before they could say more, a sudden knock at the door made them both jump. Clarissa opened it to find 2 men in dark suits. One spoke in a clipped tone. Miss Montrose, we advise you to stop looking into matters that don't concern you, for your own safety. Clarissa's voice was steady. This does concern me. The man's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. They turned and left, disappearing down the driveway. Later that evening, David Montrose returned home unexpectedly. He stepped into the living room, his gaze moving between the 2 women. Clarissa, he said slowly. Who is this? Dad, she said, her voice softening. This is Leah, my twin sister. David froze. The weight of the words seemed to sink into him, pulling his shoulders down. He sat heavily on the sofa, rubbing his forehead. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Rose told me about the pregnancy. I was ready to raise the child, but Marina, she said there was only one baby. She told me the other didn't survive. I believed her." Clarissa felt the sting of betrayal all over again. "She lied to you too." David looked at Leah, his voice thick with regret. "I should have questioned it. I'm sorry for what you went through." Leah swallowed hard. "I'm not here for apologies. I just want the truth." As they talked, the pieces began to form a full picture. Marina had arranged for the hospital records to be altered. She had paid off staff to keep quiet. The second child, Leah, was given to Rose, who was warned never to come near the Montrose family again. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Marina still had influence, and she might act again to keep the truth buried. "She won't let this come out," David warned. "Her reputation is her life. If this becomes public, she'll do anything to control it." Clarissa leaned forward. "Then we take control first. We tell the story ourselves, somewhere she can't silence us." David hesitated. "That would mean making it public. Media, press, society events. Everyone would know." "Exactly," Clarissa said. "We make it impossible for her to hide it." They agreed to reveal the truth at the upcoming Montrose Foundation Gala, an event attended by the city's most influential people. It was risky, but it was the one place Marina couldn't easily stop them without drawing attention. 2 nights before the gala, Clarissa and Leah stayed up late at the estate, preparing their evidence. They had the investigators' findings, the altered hospital records, and a recording of Rose finally telling the full story. "You need to know," Rose's voice trembled in the audio. "Marina gave me no choice. She said if I refused, she would take both of you and send you away. I couldn't risk losing you entirely." Hearing their mother's pain was difficult for Leah, but it steeled her resolve. By the time dawn broke, the plan was set. At the gala, they would take the stage together, side by side, with David at their side. They would speak the truth aloud, in front of witnesses who would carry it far beyond Marina's reach. But as they packed the documents into a leather case, neither noticed the shadow outside the window, a figure watching from the garden, phone in hand, already making a call. Someone was listening, and they weren't going to let this truth come out without a fight. The night of the Montrose Foundation Gala arrived with the crisp scent of ocean air drifting through the streets of Carmel. The grand ballroom of the seaside hotel glowed under crystal chandeliers, the hum of conversation filling the space as the city's wealthiest guests mingled. Clarissa stood near the entrance, in a simple black gown, her emerald ring catching the light. Leah was beside her, in an equally elegant dress, their resemblance impossible to ignore. David Montrose stood a step behind them, his face calm but his eyes alert. The leather case containing their evidence rested in Clarissa's hands. As they entered, heads turned. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. No one knew why David Montrose's daughter had arrived with a woman who looked exactly like her. Marina Montrose was already there, surrounded by society figures and photographers. She was dressed in silver, her smile flawless, her posture regal, but when her eyes landed on Clarissa and Leah, her expression faltered for the briefest moment. Clarissa could feel her pulse in her fingertips, but she kept walking toward the stage set at the far end of the room. The Master of Ceremonies began the evening with the usual speeches, talking about the Foundation's charitable work and upcoming projects. Then David stepped forward, taking the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady. "Before we continue tonight's program, my family and I have something to share, something long hidden but no longer." A ripple of curiosity moved through the guests. Marina's smile tightened. Clarissa and Leah joined David on stage. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint clinking of glasses from the back. "This is Leah Sanders," Clarissa said clearly, "and she is my twin sister." Gasps echoed through the hall. Flashes from cameras burst like tiny lightning strikes. Clarissa opened the leather case and took out the documents. We were separated at birth. Our father was told one of us had died. Our mother, Marina Montrose, ensured the truth was hidden. Marina stepped forward, her voice sharp. Clarissa, this is not the time or place for. But Clarissa cut her off. This is exactly the time and place. You've built your life on influence and image. Now it's time for honesty. She nodded toward the projection screen behind them. The lights dimmed, and a recording began to play. It was Rose's voice, trembling but firm. Marina gave me no choice. She said if I refused to give up one baby, she would take both. She had the power to ruin me. I had to protect Leah any way I could. The recording ended, and murmurs spread through the crowd. David stepped forward again, his voice heavy with emotion. I believed my wife when she told me one of my daughters had died. I grieve the years I lost with Leah, but now that the truth is here, I will not lose another day. Marina's carefully constructed poise began to crack. Questions from guests cut through the air. How could this happen? Why keep it secret? What would happen now? Before security could intervene, Clarissa turned back to the microphone. We're not here for revenge. We're here for truth, and for something better to come from it. She glanced at Leah, who nodded and stepped forward. We've decided to turn the Montrose estate into a retreat for families who've been separated, through adoption, distance, or circumstance, to reconnect. No one should have to wait nearly 30 years to meet their own sister. The room erupted in applause. Some guests stood, moved by the raw honesty. Others simply stared, processing what they had just heard. Marina, realizing the tide had turned, stood in silence. She had lost control of the narrative she'd guarded for decades. After the speeches, people came forward to shake Clarissa's and Leah's hands, to offer support and to promise donations for the new retreat project. Reporters approached, eager for interviews. David stayed close to both women, his presence protective and proud. Later, as the night wound down, the three of them stepped out onto the balcony. The ocean stretched dark and endless before them. Clarissa turned to Leah. We've been apart for almost our entire lives, but that ends tonight. Leah smiled faintly. We have a lot to catch up on. Side by side, they looked out toward the horizon, their identical emerald rings glinting in the moonlight. The past had been full of lies, but the future was theirs to shape, together. And as the waves crashed softly below, they knew the reckoning had brought not just truth, but the beginning of something unbreakable.